Hi folks, welcome back to Murthy Finance Academy. Let us start. So today we're going to do something a little different. We're not just going to describe India's power industry. Nope. We're going to deconstruct its economic engine. We're going to follow the money, figure out the incentives, and get right down to why profits seem to pile up in some parts of the system while they just vanish into thin air in others.
And that brings us to the big puzzle, right? The central paradox of the whole sector. You look at the numbers, and on paper, India has more than enough capacity to generate all the power it needs. It's a surplus. So why? Why do we still have power shortages? Why are the utility companies that deliver our electricity so financially stressed? Well, that's the mystery we're here to solve. We're going to dig into the economic logic of the system to find the answer.
All right, so here's our game plan. We'll start by mapping out the whole value chain. Then we'll hunt down exactly where value gets lost. After that, we'll look at what actually works, the profitable models. We'll follow the money to see where capital is shifting and wrap up with the big risks and signals you should be watching. Okay, first things first. To really get the economics, you got to see the whole map. See, the power sector isn't just one thing. It's more like a long, interconnected chain. And just like any chain, if one link is weak, the whole thing is in trouble. So let's start at the very beginning and trace that journey, right from the coal mine all the way to the light switch in your home. You can really break this whole system down into 4 big steps. Simple, right? First, you got to get the fuel. Second, you use that fuel to generate the power. Third, you send that power over long distances, that's transmission. And finally, you distribute it locally to homes and businesses. The key thing to remember, though, is that these aren't separate businesses. They're all gears in one single, massive, and kind of complex machine. So that journey starts with fuel. And in India, let's be clear, fuel pretty much means coal. But here's the interesting part. You'd think with all the coal reserves India has, we wouldn't need to buy it from anyone else, right? Well, we actually import about 27% of it, and there are a couple of solid economic reasons for this. For one, some of our power plants are designed for higher quality coal that's easier to get from overseas. And two, if you've got a power plant on the coast, it can literally be cheaper to ship coal in from, say, Indonesia than to pay for the railway costs to drag it all the way from India's own coal belts in the east. And just like that, boom, you've introduced global price volatility and supply chain risk right at the very start of the process. All right, let's move on to the next link generation. Now, if you just glance at the numbers for what we could produce, our installed capacity, it looks pretty good. It tells a story of diversification. Coal's at 50%, sure, but look at that. Renewables are a huge 30%. You'd look at this and think, wow, that's a pretty modern, healthy mix. But here's the thing. What's on paper is one thing. What actually gets fed into the grid is a whole different story. And bam, this is where the picture completely flips. When we look at the electricity that's actually generated and used, coal's share skyrockets to a massive 74%. And renewables? They drop all the way down to just 11%. So what explains this huge gap? It all comes down to one single, incredibly important word: reliability. Here's the bottom line. A coal plant can run all day, all night, 24/7. It provides what the industry calls baseload power, the steady, constant electricity the grid always needs. But solar and wind, well, they're intermittent. They only work when the sun is out or the wind is blowing. Their uptime, what we call the plant load factor, is just way, way lower. So for anyone looking at this from an investment perspective, this is your first big takeaway. Capacity isn't cash flow. Forget the headline numbers. What matters is what generates reliable, steady, billable power. Okay, so we've got our map of the value chain. Now comes the fun part. We get to take it apart, piece by piece, and look at the economics of each link. We're going on a treasure hunt to find where the profits are hiding, and, just as importantly, to find the black holes where value gets completely destroyed. This table right here, this is basically the economic DNA of the entire sector, and the contrasts are just stark. Look at generation. You need a ton of capital, but your profits are all over the place because you're totally at the mercy of fuel prices. Now look at transmission. Also needs a lot of capital, but check this out. Stable, regulated margins. They have huge pricing power because it's regulated, and the risk of their customer not paying? Super low. And then you get to distribution. Margins are often negative. Prices are capped for political reasons, and the risks? Default and theft. This is the part of the chain that's supposed to collect all the money for everyone else. And it's also the part where all that money just seems to disappear. Okay, Lean in, because this is probably the single most important point of this entire analysis. The power plants, the transmission lines, they don't send you a bill. They get paid by your local distribution company or discom. The discom is the only part of this entire chain that actually touches the money from the end customer. That means the financial health of the entire system, from the coal miner to the power plant owner, rests completely on the shoulders of these discoms. And this is where the whole thing starts to fall apart. See this number? Around 20%. That's what the industry calls aggregate technical and commercial losses. Let's put that in plain English. For every 100 rupees of electricity that gets produced, 20 rupees worth of it either gets lost in the wires or is flat out stolen before a bill can even be sent. It's just gone. To put that in perspective, in most developed countries, that number is down in the low single digits. This is a massive hole in the bucket right from the get-go. Oh, but it gets worse. Of the electricity that actually makes it to the customer, only about 85% of it is properly billed. Think about that. The other 15%, that's another leak. Maybe it's a faulty meter. Maybe it's a connection that was never recorded. Whatever the reason, the hole in that revenue bucket just got even bigger. And here's the final blow. Even for the bills that do get sent out, only about 92% of that money ever gets collected. So let's recap. You lose power on the way, you fail to bill for all the power that arrives, and then you fail to collect all the money you billed for. You stack those 3 leaks on top of each other, and suddenly it's not a mystery at all why the system is under so much financial pressure. So, the main takeaway here is that most of these state-owned discoms are, by their very design, set up to lose money. They're often forced by political pressure to sell electricity for less than it costs them to buy it. They're riddled with the inefficiencies we just talked about. This leaky bucket at the end of the line has a massive domino effect. When the discoms can't pay their bills, they can't pay the transmission companies, who in turn can't pay the power plants. It's a solvency crisis that travels right back up the entire chain. Okay, so after all that, you're probably wondering, how does anyone make money in this business? It sounds pretty bleak, but they do. So let's pivot. Enough about the problems, let's talk about the solutions. We're going to look at the business models that are smart enough and structured enough to actually succeed in this tough environment. So where's the safest bet? It's transmission. The best way to think about it is like a toll road for electrons. It's a fantastic business model. You've got huge barriers to entry. You can't just build a new national grid. And companies in this space get a regulated, guaranteed return on the money they invest. They couldn't care less if the price of coal goes up or down, or if the sun is shining. Their job is just to move the electricity from point A to point B, and for that, they collect a nice, stable, predictable toll fee. It's as simple as that. So what does a winning company look like in this space? Well, there are a few key traits. First, being vertically integrated helps a ton. If you control your own power generation and distribution, you're much more in control of your own fate. Second, owning those stable, regulated assets we just talked about is a big plus. And third, and this is probably the most important trick in the book, the smart players avoid the problem altogether. They focus on selling power directly to big industrial clients who pay their bills, or they manage distribution in wealthy urban areas, sidestepping the riskiest state-run discoms as much as possible. All right, let's shift gears and look ahead. If you want to know what the future of any industry looks like, just follow the money. Where the big investment capital is flowing today tells you everything you need to know about tomorrow. And right now, the money is telling us a story of a huge structural shift that's underway. I mean, just look at this chart. It couldn't be clearer. All the new money, all the net new capacity being built, it's going into one place: renewables, especially solar. And what about new coal plants? Investment has basically ground to a halt. The capital markets are screaming one unambiguous message: the future of power generation in India is green. But here's the twist. This massive shift into renewables solves one big problem. You're no longer hostage to volatile coal prices. But it creates a brand new one: intermittency. A grid that relies on sunshine and wind is just not as stable as one built on 24/7 coal power. And that instability, that's the next great economic opportunity. We're talking about massive battery farms to store daytime solar power for use at night. We're talking about smart grid tech that can balance supply and demand every single second. The next wave of profits in this sector will go to whoever can solve this new intermittency problem. So, let's bring it all home. What's the big picture here? What might the market be missing? And what are the critical risks and signals we need to keep an eye on going forward? You know, this quote right here really nails the core idea of everything we've talked about. The headlines, the news, it's all about generation. How many gigawatts of solar did we install this year? But that's just step one. Generation creates capacity.
Transmission is what creates access for that capacity to reach people. But distribution is what creates the cash flow. It's where the money comes in. Without that last piece, the first two are just expensive hobbies.
And that really leaves us with the trillion rupee question for the future, doesn't it? We're pouring all this money into building amazing new green generation. That's great. But who is going to solve that final, messy, critical problem? Who is going to plug the leaks in that distribution bucket to make sure someone actually pays for all this new green power? Because ultimately, the success of India's entire energy future doesn't just depend on building solar panels. It depends on finally fixing that last mile. And that is the biggest puzzle of all. Thanks for tuning in. If you like the video, please like, share, and subscribe. Disclaimer, I am not a SEBI-registered research analyst. All stocks discussed in this video are purely for educational purposes only. Do not consider it as buy or sell recommendation. Do your own research or consult a financial advisor.